22, 21, 20. I anxiously waited by the elevator, constantly glancing up at the changing floor numbers. 12, 11, 10. I called the elevator for the nth time. 2, 1. The elevator door finally opened. A few people walked out and a dozen more squeezed in. I pressed 20 and was pushed to the corner by the crowd. As the elevator was about to reach the 20th floor, it suddenly shook a few times, my heart nearly jumping into my throat. But it arrived safely. After squeezing out of the elevator, I dashed into the company like a gust of wind. I clocked in, and the weight in my heart finally settled, as the time on the clock-in machine had just hit 7:59. Time passed second by second, and soon it was time for lunch. I took a few notes from my friends and headed to the elevator to go to the first floor cafeteria for some supplies. 22, 21, 20. The elevator arrived at my floor. The door whooshed open. There were about 7 or 8 people inside. Not many, but I still didn't dare to get on. The elevator door closed with a whoosh, and I trotted back to the company, forcing a smile as I returned the notes to my friends. They all looked at me strangely, asking what happened, but I just smiled without answering. They said I must have been possessed. Right, I was indeed possessed. Near the end of the workday, I suddenly received a notice from my boss to work overtime tonight. It had been almost a month since I had been home, but in the face of generous overtime pay, I still compromised. I simply made a bowl of instant noodles, ate and drank my fill, and then busied myself in front of the computer again. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Finally, today's work was almost done, and I stretched. For the first time in 4 or 5 hours, I walked into the restroom at the end of the hallway. The lighting here hasn't been fixed for who knows how long. It's always flickering like this. I shook my head helplessly, splashed some cold water on my face. It felt so comfortable, and I immediately felt much more awake. I naturally looked up at myself in the mirror, speaking to myself, "Sigh, I'm almost 30. When will I be able to become a supervisor?" After speaking, I casually glanced at the corner in the mirror. I suddenly realized that I wasn't alone in the restroom. There was another person, standing silently in the corner as if a child who had made a mistake was being punished to stand in the corner. I turned around, about to greet him, but the words caught in my throat. Looking at the empty corner, my scalp couldn't help but tingle. Was it just my imagination? My gaze returned to the mirror. I was startled. In the dimly lit, flickering light, I clearly saw a person, and he was standing in the corner. But there's really nothing there. I panicked and filled the sink with water, immersing my entire face in it. A few seconds later, I suddenly lifted my head from the basin, wiped the water from my face with my hand. I tentatively shifted my gaze to the corner in the mirror, and after confirming that no one was there, I finally let out a breath. At some point, a pimple had grown on my face. Without thinking much, I started to squeeze it in front of the mirror. As I was squeezing, I suddenly felt an inexplicable chill down my back, followed by all the hairs on my body standing on end as if warning me, sending chills down my spine. A strange face slowly emerged from behind my head, with a terrifying smile on it, blood seeping from the corners of both eyes, and the left eyeball hanging from a tendon, swaying on my cheek. My heart began to race, and my breathing became difficult. My hands and feet turned cold and started to tingle. I wanted to turn around, but my body wouldn't obey. Like a wooden stake, I was rooted in place, unable to move. A pleasant ringtone suddenly entered my ears. I knew it wasn't for me because that ringtone didn't belong to me. But the sound was so real. If it wasn't mine, then whose could it be? I decided to let it go. As they say, if you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have to be afraid of ghosts knocking on your door. I suddenly opened my eyes, and everything returned to normal. The lights no longer flickered, and the tap was still running water. I turned off the tap, calmed my emotions, and when I followed the ringtone to a restroom door, the sound suddenly stopped. The sound must have come from here. I was very sure of my judgment. So, I knocked on the door. Bang, bang, bang. No one? Bang, bang, bang. Is anyone there? No response. I mustered my courage and carefully opened the door. A week later. Mr. Fiefin, there are 2 police officers here to see you. The nurse pointed to the door. I nodded, and two plainclothes police officers walked in with a notebook. Are you Mr. Fiefin? The male officer asked. I nodded, I am. First of all, thank you for reporting the incident in time. Since you were very unstable emotionally, the leaders at the Bureau asked us to wait and take your statement later. Go ahead and ask. As long as it helps catch the murderer, I'm willing to cooperate with the police, I said, sitting up in bed. The nurse had already left the ward and closed the door, and the two officers casually sat on the bed next to me. The male officer gestured for me to tell him what happened, and the female officer recorded it word for word. This seems a bit like a fairy tale, doesn't it? The male officer laughed, showing extreme disbelief in what I said. All right, if you remember anything else, just give me a call, he said, taking out a card from his pocket with his name and phone number on it. We won't disturb you any longer. Just take care and get well. With that, they left the ward together. Yes, even I couldn't believe it was real. Perhaps it was because I had just taken my medication. Before I knew it, I fell into a dream. From a high, side perspective, I saw the scene where I decided not to take the elevator. As soon as I left, a familiar-looking man came to the elevator, and the door miraculously opened, followed by a scream and the loud noise of the elevator crashing. Everything went blank in front of my eyes.